It was 187,000 people studied by a group from China. They were looking at self-identified food preferences. What did you eat? How picky are you? What do you prefer? The headline that came out in the media from this is that picky eaters seem to be at greater risk for adverse mental health.
Dr. William Lee.
Dr. William Lee.
Dr. William Lee.
Dr. William Lee.
One of the most sought after physicians. His groundbreaking work has impacted more than 70 diseases, including cancer, diabetes, blindness, heart disease, and obesity. Glymphatic system. I'd like you to talk about why it's so important for when we're sleeping.
When we're sleeping at night, the glymphatic channels open up and drain all these toxins away from the lymph channels, from the fluid in our brains. If you don't get sleep, if you pull an all-nighter, lymphatics never open up. You feel foggy the next day because the toxins are still in your brain. In China, there is actually a natural compound, NBP. In the lab, NBP delivered to animals who have had an experimental stroke will cause stem cells to come out to limit the damage and help of the stroke and also help the brain recover. A regenerative substance that comes from a plant called Chinese. It worked like gangbusters, so now this is actually an approved treatment for stroke for the expressed goal to be able to actually prompt brain regeneration. You find changes in the gut microbiome in people with depression and cognitive disorders and Alzheimer's disease, a sick gut bacteria, poor neighborhood.
There's lots of kind of science out there talking about our gut health and how that kind of crosses up and supports our brain health. But what would be your kind of 5 tips to keep mental health in check?
Number one, what I would actually say is that
I've loved watching this community grow and especially starting to meet you all in the comments section. But one thing, although our views are going up, our subscribers aren't. So I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button as a thank you if you've enjoyed any of our episodes. It allows us to bring bigger, more exciting guests and more continuous content. So if you've enjoyed it, just like a gentleman's handshake, please do subscribe. William, welcome to Live Well, Be Well in person in London.
amazing that we're actually here together.
I mean, our community love you, and I'm so happy that you're back and you're in London and we're doing this conversation together. And we're going to do a little bit of a different conversation today, which I'm really excited about. And we're going to talk about mental health and physical health and how they both combine. Now, something that's come out and you even sent to me, and I thought this was a really great way to start the show, was understanding around diet and mental health. It's a really big topic of conversation, and every single person seems to have their own camp on what they believe is the correct diet for a good mental health. So I wanted to start off by asking the question, can being a picky eater increase our risk of mental health conditions?
Great question. This was prompted, I think, from this article I sent you.
Yeah,
that
it was
published in this very prestigious journal, new journal, Nature Mental Health. Nature being a super credible, important journal for scientific research, discovery research. And in this group, that publication research, it was 187,000 people studied by a group from China and the UK. And they were looking at the UK Biobank. This is this massive population-based study tracked over decades, 187,000 people. And what was clever about this research was that they were looking at self-identified food preferences. What did you eat? How picky are you? What do you prefer? They had things like ketchup and curries and vegetables and meats, and offered it up so that the respondents could choose what they enjoyed eating, what they liked eating on paper, and then queried them in terms of their mental health symptoms so they could profile them. They also looked at their physical health. They had blood markers like inflammatory markers like CRP. And then what they also did is they scanned their brains, which I think is really remarkable. They actually did brain scans so they could actually look at brain structure. So here you have behavior, preference, blood markers, and brain structure. That's what made it a discovery paper. And, the headline that came out in the media from this is that picky eaters seem to be at greater risk for adverse mental health, right? And it's a surprise because if you were to be and actually the subtypes like vegetarians don't do as well or more prone to anxiety than meat eaters. Those are sort of the clickbait titles. The reality is that this study was most significant because of its design, large population, doing imaging, and then looking at blood markers, and then examining other parameters for health, including mental health, and then looking at the connection between dietary choices. They had 4 different groups of people they were looking at, or 4 different preference groups. And what I would tell you, that the things that how I interpret it as a scientist and as a physician who does research, I would say it did show that people who are more limited in their food preferences associated with different brain structure,
Wow.
different blood markers. And yes, there was an association with more vulnerability, let's say, to anxiety, depression, and some of these negative mental health outcomes that the study was looking at. However, it was not cause and effect. Is it your choosiness and then your diet that actually led to the brain changes and mental health outcomes? I don't think you can say that.
No.
In fact, I will tell you that if you took a look at the vegetarians in that study, the more limited eaters, the pickier was not, they did not use the word picky. All right, that's sort of the interpretive for the public way of describing the more narrow band eaters. What they found is that if you were eating mostly vegetarian type of cuisine, your blood markers had lower inflammation. You had less C-reactive protein, which is actually beneficial. You have less inflammation markers. They also showed that there were changes in the brain, but there was no real assignment of which parts of the brain had implications for mental health. In other words, they didn't say it activated the depression center in the brain. It was more that compared to other groups, different parts of the brains were activated differently. Now, did people who have anxiety or depression have those structural changes to begin with? That might be a closer association. And then the connection between food preference might be influenced by whether they're feeling anxious or whether they're feeling depressed. Importantly, in this study, and this is this is actually the real thing you're going to need to know about this study, they did not actually examine or make the people in the study eat the food that they preferred. So it was really a box check. So just because you might like Brussels sprouts and I don't like Brussels sprouts, doesn't mean that if we were a part of that study, that our mental health outcomes was due to the liking or not liking of a particular food type. It was just a stated preference. And I think that, the God is always in the detail when it comes to important research papers. And that's why I think the public's appetite to have a quick breakthrough or a quick surprise, shocking surprise, is usually not the way that we in science interpret it. What was really amazing about this paper is the fact that you can even get people to fill out a form, give their blood,
187,000,
and then actually have their brain
amazing.
scanned,
Yeah.
right? Like that's quite remarkable. And so if you read the end of this paper, it basically says this sets up for future research that's more specific, that has a tighter design, that looks for cause and effect. And I think that this is where we're going to be going. And that's the really exciting part about this.
It's really exciting. I guess and again, there's no cause and effect because it's not a random control placebo trial, but RCT. But what it is saying is actually, I guess, a more diverse and balanced diet at the end of the day is probably the best one for our health, which I would say is probably in line with what you think as well. Someone that's not too restrictive in how they're eating. And I know we use the word picky, but I would think about it more as restrictive. And that doesn't mean you have to be a restrictive vegetarian. It just means that you're only eating a certain limited amount of foods. And would you agree with that?
100%. So here's 2 different ways to look at the same thing. Number one, if you actually have a broader palate, a more diverse acceptance or preferences for your food. You're going to be eating more stuff, whether it is vegetable only or plant-based only, or whether it includes other healthy foods that would include animal sources of protein, fish, poultry, meat. The more we do know that the more diverse your diet, even if you're including meat, you'll actually have a more diverse microbiome. The more diverse your gut microbiome, meaning if you look at the microbiome, 40 trillion bacteria as a neighborhood that happens to be located in your gut, specifically in the cecum, which is part of your large bowel. The more diverse the neighborhood, the more healthy that neighborhood is. The less diverse, meaning if everybody's the same, it's kind of like being in a small island community where everybody's related to one another, same race, same same
genetics,
gender,
makeup.
same everything. I'll put it all together. That doesn't make for a good long-term healthy neighborhood, nor does it actually make for a good, healthy, long-term gut microbiome. Now, we know that gut microbiome does all kinds of things: gut brain, gut liver, gut immune system. They're all interconnected. So, broader diet is consistent with healthier microbiome, consistent with better brain health. Here's the other way to look at it, though. If you are restrictive, highly restrictive in your diet, let's say that you are a vegan. Veganism isn't something that you're born with. Veganism is a choice. And, I certainly respect people's decision not to eat meat. I'm an omnivore, but I would say I personally eat a mostly plant-based diet. On the other hand, some people that are very rigid may have other psychological backgrounds that make them more amenable to being rigid, right? They may be more rigid in other areas as well. They may have OCD in other areas of their life. For food, I'm only going to eat this. For paper, I'm going to make sure everything is squared away. My garden, everything's going to be clipped. The hedges are going to be clipped. And so, therefore, they may be restrictive in other areas of their life. I'm not going to exercise. I'm only going to do this. I'm going to sleep this way. And so that could also affect health outcomes. Very importantly, again, coming back to, I think, the biggest limitation of this study is that it was identified preferences, a box check, as opposed to a confirmation that they actually eat some. The real
recall bias is where that could come in, right?
Well, I think it's an interpretive difficulty.
Yeah.
It's not so much a bias, but it's difficult to interpret because we don't know if they said they like it. We don't know if they actually ate it, right? I mean, how many people do you know that...
The amount of people that come into my clinic and say, I love all these foods, and then I give them a food plan and they go, oh, I couldn't eat that.
Exactly. The idea that you go to the doctor, you tell the doctor what they say, do you exercise? Oh, yes, I exercise every single day. And then they've never been to a gym in their life, right? So I think that, but I do think that the study was quite astonishing in terms of the scale and the way that they looked at the question and the different parameters they looked at. By the way, the consistency is that people who ate more vegetables had lower inflammatory markers and had a different brain structure. I think that starts to draw one interesting a series of connect the dots. And I would say that the overall improvement in mental health associated with a self-described broader palate probably reflects a better microbiome as well. Now, so again, what would be that next experiment? So as scientists, we don't stop at one thing and then kind of play it out for a long time. Like by the time a research project, the results are published, we're on to the next study already. And so hopefully, and I would imagine the researchers behind the study are already on to looking at things like the microbiome.
That's so interesting. And something that I want to bring in here, and it might be part of this study or not, but we haven't ever spoken in this podcast about the blood-brain barrier. Now, we've done a lot of conversations around the importance of the gut microbiome. We've done an entire conversation on the vagus nerve, which connects all the way from our gut up to our brains. But the blood-brain barrier, it's a really important concept. Not many people know much about it. Can you talk to us about why this is so important? Because I guess this is where the nutrients, right, are crossing from one side of the brain into the other. But we don't I don't know that much about it. So,
Okay, so for people who don't know about the blood-brain barrier, this is a kind of a grate made of blood vessel cells that separates the brain from the rest of the body. And while it's been labeled and named as blood-brain barrier, it's really a filter as opposed to a barrier. The idea of a barrier, the name, names matter, right? What you call something matters. And a barrier sounds like it blocks things. And so this is, by the way, when I went to medical school, this is what we were taught. Blood-brain barrier is absolutely important because it prevents infections from crossing into the brain. It protects you from your brain from toxins. There was sort of an explanation for it that has turned out over the last few decades not to be entirely true. If you have cancer drugs, if you want to protect the brain, the blood-brain barrier protects it. Oh, you can't treat brain tumors with intravenous drugs because it's not going to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. Well, look, we all know that you can treat brain cancer with an intravenous drug. We do know that infections of the body can actually get to the brain. And so there's, I think, a lot of mythology around this term barrier. Think of it more as a filter. And what it does is it's a filter that is designed to allow nutrients, oxygen, growth factors, communication signals to come from all over the body into the brain. And just like the kidney has a filter, just like the liver is a filter, the brain has an interface called the blood-brain barrier. So it is absolutely vital. But I think that, and it's made out of blood vessel cells, endothelial cells. And so how we actually think about the role of the blood-brain barrier should be less of like, what does it block out? And more, I think this is, as a researcher, this is what my work has always been about. How do you take the normative thinking, what everybody believes is blood-brain barrier, it's a barrier. If you flip the script to ask a different question, what is a blood-brain barrier designed to allow? What is it that allows that it's allowing into the brain? If we understood that, we might have even better insights into brain health.
I'm so excited to share something that has been a game changer for my business. As a nutritionist and a health professional, having an online presence that truly represents my brand is crucial. I built my website on Squarespace nearly 10 years ago now, and I'm so excited to partner with Squarespace and share with you the all-in-one platform that helps entrepreneurs and health professionals like us thrive online. Now, when I started to think about building my website, I was a bit overwhelmed. Now, you don't need to worry because the Squarespace Blueprint AI makes it easy. It feels like having a personal design assistant guiding me through creating a site that looks professional and uniquely tailored to my brand. It's been amazing for showcasing my services and connecting to you, my audience. One feature I love is the members sites. I've set up exclusive sections for my inner circle members to access premium content like courses, recipes, books, and expert blogs. It's a fantastic way to offer extra value, build a stronger community, and generate steady income. And let's talk SEO. Squarespace has built-in SEO features to help make sure my website is optimized for search engines, making it easier for people to find my site and join my community. If you're a health professional or brand looking to elevate your online presence, I highly recommend Squarespace. It's been vital for growing my brand and making real impact. Check out squarespace.com/livewell for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LIVEWELL for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Yeah, because I'm even thinking about it when people talk about supplements, right? And they think about magnesium. Well, if you take one type of magnesium, it will cross the blood-brain barrier, and if you take another type, that it won't. So I guess keeping a healthy function of a blood-brain barrier is really important. And you just said there it's really important with our blood vessels. So how can we make sure that we have a very healthy blood-brain barrier that's working effectively and efficiently?
The answer to that question has to do with what is the blood-brain barrier made out of. It's made out of cells that line blood vessels. So if you think about the blood vessel as a tunnel, the endothelial lining is like plastic wrap that's inside the tube. So this plastic wrap is stretched out as part of the filter the blood-brain barrier, BBB as we call it, and the health of the endothelium of the blood vessel cells is the health of the blood-brain barrier, but that health is reflected on the health of the endothelium, the lining, and the rest of the body as well. So the best way, and I don't think we can separate, like, I'm just going to take this magic supplement that's only going to be blood-brain barrier. If you start hearing people talk like that, it's probably
pseudoscience.
It's probably a claim that it's going to require a huge bar of evidence. But what I will tell you is that because the blood-brain barrier is this filter, and it's made out of vascular endothelial cells, the lining of blood vessels. How healthy your overall blood vessels are, your circulation, and the rest of your body is a good reflection of how healthy your blood-brain barrier is. So you can actually do things to keep better endothelium in your body. Simple things like exercise, regular physical activity helps to keep your blood vessels in motion, circulating, pumping, passaging nutrients and oxygen. That's good for your whole body's blood vessels, including the blood-brain barrier. You want to keep inflammation down because inflammation can damage your endothelium. So think about inflammation like if you were to just pour gasoline onto your rug and put a match to it. You're going to set it on fire. And that's what inflammation does to the lining of your blood vessels. So if you lower inflammation, you'll also be protecting the lining of your blood vessels everywhere, including at the blood-brain barrier. The other thing I would say is a diet. What can we actually eat that is helpful for your endothelium? Turns out that there's some good news here. One of them is that dark chocolate, cacao, is extraordinarily good for nurturing. It's sort of the health coach of your vascular endothelium. Cacao, the bioactives, the proanthocyanidins, really make a healthy lining of your blood vessels. So dark chocolate is good for your brain.
What percentage?
I generally say that the higher the percentage, the more cacao, which is the plant-based aspect, the higher the polyphenols, the proanthocyanidins. I would say, it's a gradient, but I like to tell people look for 80% or higher. You've crossed the threshold of goodness once you get to 80%.
Okay, that's great, because it's always good to check, because sometimes I buy dark chocolate that says dark chocolate and it's about 50%. So you've actually got to check before you buy it, I think,
Look for the
which
number.
is really important. Yeah.
Look for that number. 80 or higher is good.
So when we're thinking about this blood-brain barrier, do you think it impacts our mental health? Because if it's not working as effectively as it should, do you think there's any kind of relation there to how we're feeling, whether it's memory loss or brain fog or anything like that, or on the extreme end, depression or anxiety? Do you think there's any overlap there?
I think that what you're really talking about is not just the blood-brain barrier. You're talking about brain health overall. Yeah. And when you actually have, I think our brain, by the way, is quite resilient, quite well designed, and quite capable of actually maintaining itself within a pretty wide spectrum of life experiences, of toxic exposures. I mean, our brain, think about all the things that we subject ourselves to. When we were kids, tumbling on the ground or taking a fall, we hit our heads. Look, it bounces right back for the most part. And yet, when we think about anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, now you get more serious schizophrenia, and then you move into the cognitive disorders, you are talking about deviations away from that resiliency, right? Because the brain isn't able to bounce back. Arguably, we all get depressed, but most of us don't stay in a state of depression, right? So when we actually move away from that resiliency. That's how I think it's helpful for your listeners and your viewers to think about this, is these mental health issues become significant when we lose our brain's resiliency. All right. What are some of those things that we do know? Because there's a lot we don't know yet. But what we do know, inflammation is very present in the brain, and all of its linings and all of its barriers, the blood-brain barrier being one of them. Yeah, you see problems, not only structurally, but you find problems in the filter part of the brain as well. Is the filter the cause? I don't think so. I think that it's part of the evidence. It's part of the detective story. The forensics of looking at what causes deviation from resiliency in the brain. You'll find some of the problems. Some of the smoking gun is also found in the blood-brain barrier, but in other parts of the brain as well.
So what should we be doing then to think about keeping this all healthy and together, apart from some dark chocolate? Because I'm guessing there's lots of kind of science out there talking about our gut health and how that kind of crosses up and supports our brain health. But what would be your kind of 5 tips to keep mental health in check?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, so let's play this out in a scenario.
Yeah, I'm ready.
We're on a ship. We get shipwrecked onto an island. All right, and so the question is, the question you asked me is, how would I stay as mentally healthy as possible? All right, so you're starting with 0, okay, because the boat sank and we're on the sand. Okay, so number 1, what I would actually say is that you do want to find food that is not only nourishing for your muscles, but you want to make sure that you're finding and eating foods that's actually good for your gut. Anything with fiber, plant-based foods. Prebiotic foods are basically colorful foods that have the polyphenols that also contribute to feeding our gut microbiome. So the colorful ones, red, yellow, and orange peppers, the greens. And by the way, I don't know if you're a painter, but I do a lot of art. Green is a beautiful color. There's so many shades of green. And if you take a look at, the really deep, almost black green of lacinato kale, the dinosaur kale, versus the bright greens that you might actually find in a Bib lettuce, for example, it's actually a pretty cool color. Like you could paint a whole room, or you can make a painting out of these different greens. And so again, it's not just green versus orange, but even within the same color tone, there are the spectrum. And so that's why you don't need to just kind of like pick, a red or an orange and a blue and a green. Go to the produce market and look at the diversity of colors. Even with things that look green or look red, you'll see all this diversity. And that's where the beauty is. Mother Nature has put all these bioactives. So bioactives are prebiotics. Prebiotics do a lot of things to your health defenses, do a lot of things that are good, by the way, for your vascular endothelium, good for the lining of your blood vessels, and therefore good for your blood-brain barrier. But they all work in a beneficial way to feed your gut microbiome. Healthy gut is healthy brain, and polyphenols will do this, but also dietary fiber. Dietary fiber could come from the stringy vegetables, the broccoli or the broccoli stems. You wind up chewing on them for a long time. Or carrots have a lot of dietary fiber. But don't be fooled. The stringiness of a plant-based food doesn't necessarily tell you about its fiber. So, for example, pears have a reasonable amount of dietary fiber. A ripe, juicy pear, about 6 grams of dietary fiber in a medium-sized pear. Amazing, right? Peaches, bright summer peach, juicy peach, also has a reasonable amount of dietary fiber. You want to look for the softest vegetable that I know, or softest produce that I know, avocado.
I was going to say, is it an avocado? Yeah.
Amazing source of dietary fiber. So mushrooms, also a good source of dietary fiber. So don't judge the book by the texture, but you have to just know. By the way, you can look this up. You can look up how much dietary fiber is. There are tables and charts. You can look up online to be able to get an idea. So dietary fiber, polyphenols, what's good for the body is going to be good for the brain.
That's really important. I think what I heard you say, and I don't know if this is correct, we can regenerate parts of our brain. Is that true? I know this is a very big thing because it's coming on to understanding more around cognitive decline, but thinking about that is such a large statement, and gives a lot of hope if that is true. Is that true?
Okay, so when I went to medical school, it was very clearly taught to all the doctors to be that humans don't regenerate, and of all the things that heal very slowly, the brain, once you have a stroke and you have a blockage to the circulation of the brain or bleed that destroys the brain, that's it. Game over for that part of the brain. But we know that's not true because, and I actually questioned that as I went through my schooling and training because I saw plenty of stroke patients who they were kind of knocked out immediately after their stroke, but over the course of a week, you saw differences towards recovery. A month, 6 months, and even a year later, you see people can continue to improve. That is not a scar, even though there might be scar-like features in the scan. That's recovery. Now, what causes recovery? Rewiring. We used to say, well, the brain electrical signals found a way around the blockage, so it was able to ignore the blockage and find its way through. That's true. We do know that you can rewire after brain injury, but as we began learning more about stem cells, progenitor cells, we began realizing that progenitor cells also play a role in brain recovery after traumatic injury. Now, how do we know this? Well, one thing is that if you take a look at somebody with a stroke and you try to, we can scan somebody after a stroke in a hospital, you can see the exact area where there's a problem. All right. Right where the blockage is a part of the brain that looks like it's dying, and it looks worse, a couple of days later. You could actually draw blood from that same patient, which we do all the time in the hospital in stroke patients. Let's get some blood and let's run their blood tests. You're checking their blood chemistry, you're checking their blood count, all the usual things that happen. But once we began doing research on stem cells, we were able to actually count the stem cells. And guess what? After a stroke, stem cells are called by your brain out of your bone marrow to help rescue parts of the brain through healing, repair, and regeneration, because that's what stem cells do. They regenerate. Wow. So I think that this idea that the brain doesn't regenerate is an old idea. And now as we're beginning to learn more about stem cells, we're beginning to realize that they also play a part in recovery from stroke. They also play recovery in traumatic brain injury as well. And then the real exciting thing, and I've been, I run the Angiogenesis Foundation. We've been part of this. Could we in the future deliver a dose of stem cells to the brain after a stroke in an effort to recover? Now, in animals in a lab, delivering stem cells will actually help the brain regenerate and recover from stroke. It'll protect it from having as much damage as might otherwise happen. So again, research is showing that stem cells play a role. Brain can regenerate, even human brains. Does it slowly. It would be great to optimize it. And we don't have that magic key to unlock how to optimize it. However, in China, which has a completely separate FDA, it's called the SFDA, the Sino FDA, they've already approved a regenerative substance that comes from a plant, Chinese celery. I don't know if you've ever been to an Asian market to look at celery.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
It's not the same short, fat, thick, very rigid celery. Chinese celery is very long, and it kind of droops. All right,
it's floppy.
It's also a lot more potent. It smells like celery. If you were to cut it up and stir fry it, it really has a really, really powerful celery taste to it. Actually, it's a delicious, I like to cook, so I always talk about this. It's got a delicious flavor to it. It really enhances a vegetable dish, for example, like a vegetable stir fry, if that's what you want to do. There is actually a compound in there, a natural compound called nitrobutyl phthalate, NBP. In the lab, NBP delivered to animals who have had an experimental stroke will cause stem cells to come out to limit the damage and help of the stroke and also help the brain recover. So in China, they ran that clinical trials, phase 3 clinical trials. It worked like gangbusters. So now this is actually an approved treatment for stroke, plant-based substance, NBP, to treat stroke expressly for the goal, or I should say for the expressed goal, to be able to actually prompt brain regeneration.
My number one rule is that health should be personalised and tailored to the individual. But it can be hard to do if we don't know where our current health status is. Are you someone who's been trying countless supplements and health trends but end up feeling no different? Before you even start thinking about these things, it's crucial to assess where your health status currently is. That's where Optimally Me can make a world of difference. Optimally Me is a health optimization platform that provides personalized health recommendations based on your unique biology and goals. It offers access to a variety of diagnostic blood tests, digital tools, and devices, helping you see the bigger picture of your health, whether it's metabolic, gut, hormone, mental, skin, or cardiovascular health. This is where your foundation of health should start, with the understanding of where it currently stands. What I love about Optimally Me is it allows you to analyze your health biomarkers and personalize your health journey. You can start your personalized journey with the full body MOT and DNA epigenetics blood tests. These tests assess multiple areas of your health and determine how lifestyle and environment are aging your body. Once you have your comprehensive health overview, you can start to connect your wearable devices and work with expert health coaches using the Optimally Me dashboard to support your health. And here is a little something for you. Use the code LWBW20 to get 20% off your order, because your health is personal and so should your health plan.
Wow. And is it only in that one vegetable? Is it in other vegetables?
Don't know. I mean, this is the idea. Is like, once you find it in one vegetable, where else can we find N-butyl phthalate, right? So this is food as medicine research.
Yes.
We're beginning to discover a clue in one area. Let's go and see if it's present in other substances as well. For example, I'll give you an example of something I'm working on.
Yeah.
We do know that mushrooms, which have dietary fiber, have something, a bioactive called beta-D-glucan. Beta-D-glucan, by the way, is really good for your endothelium, your lining, good for blood vessels of the body, also good for blood vessels of the brain. It's also anti-inflammatory, also improves your immune system as well. This beta-glucan is also found in oats, so like oatmeal. And so we took a page of the playbook from what we've learned from mushrooms, because we know that the beta-D-glucan can be important for healing, and we extracted from oats and tested to see if the oats beta-glucan will actually have healing. And guess what we found? And we presented this last year at a wound meeting. In the lab, when you actually treat a wound with oat-derived bioactives, including beta-glucan, you can double the rate of normal healing. You can speed up normal healing. You can improve the circulation underneath the surface. So after the wound is healed, kind of like the covering is shut, right? It's like, but what about underneath? Well, we found that beta-D-glucan from oats will actually improve the circulation, better blood flow, which is what you want for better healthy tissue, right? And we also found, when we cut out the wound and look under the microscope, something startling. The wound that healed is scarless, no scar. Okay. And then when we looked even deeper, we found that part of what made it scarless was it recruited stem cells, right? So this is insights that we gained from mushrooms. We applied it to oats. Then we jumped into wound healing. It was also powerfully anti-inflammatory as well. This is how food as medicine researchers like me actually take discoveries in one area and try to apply it to other areas and explore what else can we do. So I think it'd be fascinating to take a look at this Chinese celery-derived NBP and ask, are there any other plants that have this? And if so, could we develop some protocols potentially for people who need better brain recovery or brain regeneration? So I always try to delineate and distinguish when I talk about research in a lab is really in cells or animals. It's rigorous research. It might be a long ways away from a human application. And I also talk about clinical work. I think it's really important when we have these conversations about what food might be doing or food as medicine, we need to distinguish what's clinical, meaning relevant to people, versus preclinical, meaning not yet in humans, not ready yet for prime time.
It's really important. I'm now just thinking about any time I've got a wound, I'm going to be eating loads of oats. But I'm glad that you've mentioned that, because there's a huge debate at the moment about oats. Are they good? Are they bad? I don't know if you've seen this on social media, but just hearing from what you said, it's obvious that oats are fantastic.
Oats are good. Listen, I mean, I think we're fortunate to live at a time where we have the ability to learn huge amounts of information in short periods of time, very accessibly on our mobile. All right. social media happens to be, everyone has their own TV media channel to be able to say something. But what I would say is that the more certain somebody is about a claim, the more you want to check their credentials. I mean, you should check their credentials anyway.
100%.
All right. It doesn't take a credential to make a health statement. For me, because I am a scientist and I'm a researcher and I'm a physician, like if I were talking to fellow scientists or if I were talking to a fellow clinician, I would want to just make sure that I'm accurate with what I actually say. And so I'm very careful about that. And I think that's how you actually avoid the missteps that can occur on the receiving side, the people listening to the information. Look, most of them are not scientists. Most of them are not clinicians. Most of them wouldn't have any clue how to read a paper, how to critically read a paper, how to critique it to say, well, I'm not so sure about this. Could be done better, right? And I think that's where folks that are trained in science, like you and I, we have the responsibility of doing that heavy lifting. And although we speak to the general audience, I think that it's double the responsibility to get it right when we do the heavy lifting and then to get it right when we explain it to somebody who is wanting to learn, but might not have the ability to distinguish all the details by themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree. I honestly think that when anyone demonizes a whole food, red flag. Yeah, just a good whole food, red flag. And oats is a whole food. And that's what's terrifying, that there's this debate going on at the moment. So I'm really glad that we touched upon that. Something that I want to go into, and I say this, I know that we do have a lot of younger listeners who might not think that this is relevant, but my grandmother sadly passed away from Alzheimer's. So I saw her decline. And I think it's one of the most saddest diseases for the family to watch unfold. And I know a lot of dear friends at the moment even have their parents who've got dementia. I actually know that your mother at the moment has dementia. So it's a very close subject for you and I, and for many people listening. And something that I'm really fascinated in, because we can get all these genetic tests now, and some people, might think they've got a genetic predisposition to dementia, is around prevention of this. Because we kind of look at this of when we've got it, what do we do? But actually, the more understanding we have of it earlier, the better the risk of not getting it or delaying that. So that sounds like a big thing, but can you slow down or reverse dementia? Because it is something that is terrifying and we might not think about, but I think it's a really important conversation to touch upon.
Well, as a medical professional, I will tell you that dementia is a big category. It's a descriptive category of a huge class of diseases where your brain is compromised and you're not able to your cognitive functions and some of your neurological functions are not operating within that normal boundary. That there's, again, deviation from resiliency. You go from being able to bounce back to slowly losing your grip on being able to be resilient, and then even losing your grip to be even functional at a baseline level. And by the way, it's a gradient, right? So, when I was 20 years old, I could remember everything.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm trying to figure out like, okay, where was that paper from?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
the
that's
brain
okay.
fog.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's also a gradient, but I will tell you that. So again, this idea of our brain being resilient, bouncing back, that's fine. All right. Where we really have difficulty, and I think this is what you're getting at, is we all fear cognitive decline. We all fear this idea our brain isn't working properly. Alzheimer's is a very specific disease, and many people who are said to have Alzheimer's might not actually have Alzheimer's. They need a neurologist to properly diagnose it. They may not have Alzheimer's may not be the only condition they have. They may have other things going on at the same time, kind of a double whammy or multiple whammy that's affecting their brain function. Or they may have an altogether different neurological, neurodegenerative condition that masquerades with some of the same symptoms as Alzheimer's. We call that dementia. But so rather than try to go for the diagnosis and then look for that magic pill that can actually reverse it or a magic food that can reverse it, which is what people that are watching that or listening, that's what they want. They were looking for that simple solution. I think prevention is really key, especially in areas that we're still doing research and we don't fully have a full understanding of it. Okay, so what are the things that we know that are helpful for reversing dementia? We know that, actually, before I go there, let me just say, what are the main things that actually put you at greatest risk for dementia? Okay. Well, I told you many causes of dementia, many types of dementia, but I'll tell you, if you have a family history of some type of neurodegeneration, some form of dementia, you're going to be at higher risk. Okay. Alzheimer's specifically, but I think that other forms of dementia as well, Parkinson's being another one, Huntington's disease, ALS has a genetic component, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. I have a really, really dear friend of mine who has had this, could be genetic. All right. That's a risk factor. I think if you had head trauma, you played football or hockey as a kid, or boxers, the repeated head, the intracranial head trauma, CTE, that actually is a setup for loss of resiliency and improper brain function as you get older. And by the way, that's tied directly into mental illness as well.
Wow. Okay.
Depression, suicidal ideation, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all the symptoms come up. All right. In addition to cognitive defects. So again, lots of things are feeders into this as another risk factor. We also know, and this is actually more recent discovery, I think this is probably profound, a profound recent discovery is that our gut health, our gut microbiome probably plays a gigantic role in maintaining that brain resiliency because we are finding in people with depression and cognitive disorders and Alzheimer's disease, okay, many of these inability to recover from brain not being resilient all the way to frank dementia, Alzheimer's disease, you find changes in the gut microbiome. So if you study two groups of age-matched patients, and you study, one of the groups has Alzheimer's, the other group same age, same other features, don't have Alzheimer's. One of the major differences you find between the two groups is their gut microbiome is very, very different. There's dysbiosis, or a sick gut bacteria, poor neighborhood, unhealthy neighborhood in the patients with Alzheimer's. Is that cause or effect? Well, more likely that is a contributory cause. The brain didn't cause a bad microbiome. It's more likely the bad microbiome, and it could be that Alzheimer's brains are intensely inflamed, lots of inflammation, and blood vessels growing in ways that are releasing toxins and not bringing better perfusion. I published a paper on Alzheimer's in The Lancet in the year 2000, proposing that Alzheimer's has an angiogenesis component to it as well. And it's a very frequently cited paper. There's much more research to be done on that. Look, these are deviations from normal, right? So gut microbiome, head trauma, genetic family history. We don't know. There's so many other questions. Is it environmental exposures? Are there epigenetics that could actually make a difference? What about microplastics? Nanoplastics, right? The credit cards that we're eating every single week, unbeknownst in our food. So
I want to share something that's helped my skincare routine, the Bon Charge Red Light Face Mask. Red light therapy is fantastic for your skin because it helps reduce inflammation and increases collagen production, making your skin look healthier and more youthful. The Bon Charge Red Light Face Mask uses the optimal wavelengths of red 630 nanometers and infrared 850 nanometers light to deliver these benefits. Now, someone in my early 30s, wrinkles aren't a huge issue yet, but the minor lines I did have are already smoothed out. And what really surprised me was how well this mask works for acne. It helps settle the acne quicker and reduces any dark spots afterwards. It's been a real game changer for those unexpected breakouts. Now, prevention is key for me, and using this mask is a great step to help reduce the signs of aging. It's also become vital in my self-care routine, and during this time, I incorporate the meditation practice, making it one of my favorite times of the day. So if you're curious about how red light therapy can help your skin, I highly recommend giving it a try. Go to boncharge.com/livewell and use the code LIVEWELL for 15% off your order.
Those
And
are
I
risk
also was going to
factors.
say,
Yeah.
before you go into the positives, sorry to interrupt, but we had James Kinross on the show who I spoke to you about, who wrote Dark Matter, and he was talking about fecal transplants. And he was even saying there is now studies, because you spoke about the gut microbiome, where they are transferring fecal microbiota transplants into people with Alzheimer's, and it's working, which is quite mind-blowing. So when you're talking about the gut microbiome, it's a powerhouse.
That's translational research at its best, something that we know, and that there's some positive benefits that we're seeing in the lab in animals. Okay. Research data. Animals aren't humans. We've cured cancer in animals many times. We're still working and struggling to get it to work reliably in humans. Same thing in Alzheimer's. I think it's really exciting that they're translating that research to humans. Well, let's talk about things that can lower your risk of cognitive disorders, ranging from just having difficulty finding it, can't remember where your keys are, or what you ate for dinner last night, to all the way to full-blown dementia. So again, accept the fact these are different diseases, different conditions. Are there things that I could generally say would lower risk? A couple of things. Number one, better gut health is probably going to wind up being one of the central, it's probably going to be the bullseye. I think, in 20 years, we're going to be looking back and say, why didn't we think of this 100 years ago? Gut health, bad gut health, poor gut health is bad brain health. So, and by the way, when does it start? It probably starts when we're children. So for all the parents out there, younger people who, have younger kids, it's like, they got the rest of their lives to figure it out. Wrong. When we're thinking about making decisions, when young parents are making decisions for young children, they may be actually casting their fate, both positive and negative, at a very, very early age. And so I think getting kids onto good dietary patterns that foster better gut health, they're going to be thanking you when you're long gone, okay? Because their gut microbiome will be healthier, their brain will probably be healthier as well. And you're right, there are lots of research studies, clinical research studies, being able to look at this now to see what we can actually, getting more evidence to have a better understanding of it. So number one, gut health. So all the things related to gut health: better diet, less ultra processed foods, et cetera, et cetera. Number two, regular physical activity. Everyone feels, when you're younger, you feel like, what? I want to be in shape. I'm going to join a gym. Some people say, I want to get a trainer. And you look in the mirror and you look pretty good. Look, that is something that people can do in a certain window in their lives. But really, being physically active is something that we can actually do our entire lives. And that's what's important, is consistent, regular physical behavior. Look, kids are running around all the time. They're bouncing off the walls, right? Teenagers are super active. Young adults, you're rushing off to work. You're zipping around, going out to events and parties and, things like that. When you get to middle age, you're tired. There's things happening to you. You're worn down. And a lot of those physical activity things that we might have otherwise done, we slow down on. I would encourage people to keep up your physical activity, be mindful of your movement, right?
But I even think the younger generation, because a lot of us can sit behind laptops all day for 9 hours and we don't move, and then we think a 20-minute run is going to solve the movement crisis. Well, as we're not in a crisis, but tick all of our boxes of movement, but actually we're probably getting less because we're sitting down all day.
Right. Well, that's bringing up not only the kind of the laptop phenomenon. Look, if you're a laptop, yeah, but if you're mobile, you can still walk when you're mobile.
Yeah, totally.
However, now we're talking about another dimension, which is blue light that shines out of our devices that interferes with our sleep. So after physical activity, I'm going to get to the sleep part, staying in motion is really important throughout your whole life. Not only is it important for brain health, but it's important for overall mobility as well. Somebody once told me that, as we get older, when we're younger, we can, climb on walls like Spider-Man. But when you get older, you don't think about doing that anymore. And yet, if you think about like a leopard in the jungle, it's hunting. It is pouncing from tree to tree branch to tree branch its entire life. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to hunt or eat. That's kind of what we need to be able to actually do, is to stay limber, stay agile, and stay in motion. That has been shown to improve vascular health, blood vessel health, which then, of course, addresses the blood-brain barrier, which then also directly addresses the circulation in the brain. More movement brings better blood flow just by the nature of movement. So stay in motion, all right? The other thing that I think is really important is social connection. Social connection turns out to be, it sounds like a kind of a hand-wavy sociology, psychology thing, have good friends, make good connections, network. It's much more vital than that. If you look at the blue zones where people live not just long lives, but they live vitally, they live with a vibrancy. Part of their vibrancy is their connection to other people. They want to be connected to other people. When and so that's also important, is to find meaning. There's a term called hedonia, right? So that's where you get great pleasure in something. And then there's eudaimonia. This is a newer concept. Eudaimonia is actually feeling a sense of purpose and happiness because of your purpose. When you've got friends, when you've got family, when you've got good connections, you feel like you're part of your purpose is to be there for them. That's really important too. And although we don't understand the biology behind that, that's also very important for brain health, and it probably ties into the preventative aspect, the social connections that actually lower the risk of dementia. Then the last thing I'll tell you is sleep. Good sleep is important, right? And I always say, everyone knows how important it is, because if you've ever pulled an all-nighter, whether it's studying for an exam or being at a party or just traveling on a plane, to a distant destination where you just don't sleep well. So you're watching the movie on the plane or reading a book or maybe working on the plane. The next day you feel absolutely wiped out. And physically, I would say your brain feels more wiped out than physically you feel wiped out.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Your muscles might be tired, but you know what? You can still go out and do things, but your brain is wiped out. If you do that day after day, week after week, month in and month out, I guarantee you it takes a toll on your brain. And we do know that people with dementia, various types of dementia, it's associated with a lifelong history of poor quality sleep. Sleep is not just travel, it's also eating. How you eat, when you eat, can also affect how well you sleep. It can also be physical activity. You don't exercise, you're not going to sleep as deeply. When you exercise, we all know if you have a good vigorous exercise, you're going to sleep a little bit more deeply. Blue light.
That's a big one.
Right? So
it's a really big one.
How many of us, and listen, I'm as guilty about this as anyone else, right? You got to check one more email before you go to bed, or bing, the text comes in. Who's texting me? What could be important now, right? Back in the day of the landline,
I know,
when you had the cord on the wall, which, like you only see in museums or old movies now, right? If the phone was silent, you didn't, you just went to bed. Yeah. It was around. Now we're actually actively distracted. Turns out the blue light that gets emitted from our laptops, our iPads, our phones, actually penetrates our retina and disturbs our brain's ability to prepare properly for sleep. So we don't get good quality REM sleep. And just, I think what people say is that, you should try to step back from your screen at least an hour before you go to bed. And that's hard.
It's really hard. I've started using these like little lamps that are next to me that are red light lamps. So I try to do that if I want to read something or I want to not look at my phone, to try and do something which is not obviously a television, then that's a really good kind of opportunity. But I think a lot of it as well, when we spoke to Dr. Sachi Panda on this podcast, he was saying so much of us are spending 90% of our time indoors. So we're not even getting the natural daylight to work with these sleep mechanisms, which I kind of also shocked me. I'm aware that we spend a lot of the time indoors, but 90% is actually a really big part. So I guess a lot of it is as well getting outside in the morning as well to like wake your system up, which is really key.
And the type of light that we're exposed to indoors versus outdoors. Outside, you have, the depending on where you live, you have sunlight a lot of the time. You also have ultraviolet radiation that's, which is a risk factor as well. But you get different types of light that stimulate us. By the way, you know what the third eye?
No. Oh, what, here?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
exactly.
third eye. Yeah.
Right? So the third eye
I say that if you're watching on YouTube, you would
She's
see
just
me
pointing
point,
to
but
it.
it's in between my brows, right in the middle of my head.
Exactly. The third eye is a real thing. I used to think it was sort of a myth or kind of just something funny that somebody came up with, but it's an actual genuine thing. If you looked at evolution, very early on, animals, lower vertebrates, like lizards, actually developed a light-sensitive portion of their on their skull that performed the function of a third eye. Now, the term eye doesn't mean that you're literally processing details that you're seeing movement on the horizon. It's not like a rattlesnake looking for a rodent to strike at. But the third eye relates to neural cells that are sensitive to light, that control the circadian cycle. And reptiles have this, so they know when the sun is up and the sun is down. Other animals also have this third eye. If you talk to a paleontologist, they'll tell you that dinosaurs also had a third eye, right? So this goes way back.
Wow.
We don't have an overt third eye. So people think, like I'm going to take some lipstick and draw an eye on it. No, actually, we probably do have light sensors somewhere, above our brow line that actually are sensing natural things. We're still discovering new organs and new cells in our body. So being inside is all the time is probably not so helpful. Being outside is going to be helpful. When you're outside, move around, right? And you're going to get better sleep. And you're going to train your circadian cycle, which is your day and night cycle, to be more in tune with wherever you're living, wherever you're residing. All these, success in health is the sum of lots of little things properly done. And so that's why I always think that when people say, Dr. Lee, what supplement should I take to, cure my this? Or it's not that simple. It's the little things that we do. It's not a silver bullet, it's silver buckshot.
I think when we're on sleep, something that people haven't heard of, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, so you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to give it a go. The glymphatic system.
Perfectly said.
I've done it right. Great. Oh my gosh, I'm very proud of myself. People might not have heard of that. And I bring this up because I'd like to talk about it, why it's so important for when we're sleeping, especially in connection to dementia or memory loss or cognitive decline, or just generally for good health when we're thinking about these preventable diseases. Yeah.
So the term that you said exactly correctly, glymphatic, sounds like lymphatic. And let's start with that, because lymphatic is where these glymphs come from. The lymphatic system is a alternative circulatory system in our body that's everywhere, and it transfers fluid that's not blood. So blood stays in blood vessels, but lymph fluid, which is also part of what keeps our flesh nice and plump and plumped out, actually is, and fluid coming back to our heart to be pumped up again and mixed up with blood again, is transferred through the lymphatic channels. Now, most people might not think about lymphatics, but you've seen it. You've seen people with those massively swollen legs and ankles, right? Those are people who have lymphatic problems because their channels or lymph channels are not able to properly hold in the fluid, or they're blocked. And now the fluid pools and you've got this gigantic elephant-like lower leg.
Well, I even get that when I get off the plane. If I've been on a very long plane journey, I have those really big swollen ankles.
And if you push on it, you'll actually create a little dimple.
Yeah.
And slowly your body will kind of become resilient. It'll bounce back and your lymph channels will bring that fluid all the way back and you'll be fine again. All right. So if that's present everywhere in your body, your brain has a special type of lymph system all by itself. All right. And it's actually called the glymphatic system. This was discovered, less than 20 years ago, the glymphatic channel. So again, what I'm saying is that, you'd think that we'd know everything there is to know about the human body, 4,000 years of medical research, right? No, we're still discovering new things. So the glymphatic network is a sewer system that's in the brain. It's buried throughout the brain. You don't even notice it during the daytime. It's kind of like the sewers of Paris. You got this beautiful street the Houseman architecture, arrondissement on the top, that's like our brain, all the little cell side, the little curves in our brain. But deep inside, underneath, is this glymphatic channel. Now, why is it glymph, not lymph? Well, because the cells lining these brain lymphatic channels are made with glial cells. Glia, Glia, is what we refer to as specialized brain cells. All right, glial cells are brain cells. So this is actually specialized brain cells that actually form this sewers of Paris inside our brain. And when do they go to work? When are the sewers active? Well, it turns out, and I'm giving you the simple explanation that people will be able to get, right? It turns out that during the day, when we are thinking and making our shopping list and trying to solve a problem, doing our activities of daily living, all right, and we're using our brain, we're accumulating oxidative free radicals, oxidative stress just from thinking, okay? We're also accumulating other toxins that can actually build up. Free radicals are arguably they're helpful, but if you have too many, they're toxic. So what happens, that's amazing about this lymphatic system, is that when we're in the daytime, they're shut, okay? Business is closed, but when we're sleeping at night, the lymphatic channels open up and drain all these toxins away from the lymph channels, from the fluid in our brain. So when we're sleeping, our brain is being cleared of these toxins. That's a simple way to look at it. So powerful.
Certain types of sleep or not, or any sleep?
You want to have really, if the lymphatics open up wide when you're in good REM sleep. That's when you're dreaming. That's when the brain is really, really cleaning itself out. If you don't get sleep, if you pull an all-nighter, lymphatics never open up. And guess what? You feel foggy the next day because the toxins are still in your brain. This is how we're beginning to understand that fuzziness in our head, the brain fog, the challenges that we actually have. You feel like crap the next day when you pull an all-nighter, right? Had a great time at a party. The next day, whether you had alcohol or not, the next day, you're just not performing at your best. And that's why we, tell students, look, study ahead and try to get a good night's sleep before you take your exams, because pulling an all-nighter to study, you might be able to pull off a good score, but chances are your brain's not going to be functioning at its best.
Is it different? Because you said it doesn't open unless we sleep, but how is it versus deep sleep and REM sleep?
Well,
is there a difference?
REM sleep, deep sleep is really where your brain is at its sort of optimal function in the sleep state. REM sleep occurs during that deep sleep state. Anything above that, if you think about it like the ocean, right? You're at the deep water, okay, like the Marianas Trench. That's really deep. The Titanic is down there. That's actually where your a lot of systems in your brain are actually functioning. Think about it like rebooting your brain. The Control Alt Delete. You're forcing your brain to restart. This is actually what happens when you're in deep sleep. Everything else, your operating system is still kind of running. It's still got all the applications open, not quite cleaning itself out. All right, and this is why good quality sleep matters. If you eat a midnight snack, it's going to be harder for you to have good quality sleep. If you drink alcohol in the evening, even a glass of red wine, that traditional glass of wine that people have with dinner, the alcohol actually prevents you from actually getting really, really good quality sleep. If you have caffeine, some people are very sensitive to caffeine, and the caffeine keeps them from sleeping at night. And then, women during menopause, they have hormonal shifts. They're not getting good sleep. All of these things interfere with the drainage of toxins and free radicals and all this accumulated stuff that happens during the brain. And if you really want to take good care of your cognition the next day, you really want to do everything possible to get good sleep.
It is interesting, isn't it? Sleep has become, in the last 5 to 10 years, like the foundational step to health. It's kind of like the number one marker to get there. But I think just thinking about it as this drainage system is really helpful when we're all laying there. And I do this late at night, thinking about everything that comes through my head, my to-do list, things I haven't got done. It's actually best to just try to sleep because it's only going to feel worse the next day, right?
Something practical, I think, for anybody who has a very active and busy life to do is to wind down. Wind down not only putting your mobile stuff away and, just it's okay. You can deal with it tomorrow. But then take a little time to meditate or go for a walk, and just appreciate, be grateful for being alive and take a look around you without having these intrusive thoughts of work. I think that self-care and self-compassion involves really allowing yourself to not work.
Self-kindness. I mean, you said one of my kind of favorite words of all time, which is self-compassion, which is self-care.
Yeah.
And allowing ourselves to be kind to ourselves, which is so fundamental. It's so fascinating. And I always want to ask this question, especially to you, because I feel like you have so much going on, that I want to know, like, what are you most excited about right now?
Oof, I'm involved with a lot of exciting projects. One project I'm really excited by is, my whole career, my professional career has really been about applying creativity to science and aiming those things at discovery. So I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to excite myself with discovery, and I'm aiming for that thing that's not quite known and being able to reach out and grasp it and pull the cover off and to see what's there. And this has really been, I guess, my track record and how I've enjoyed and what's been fulfilling for me in my professional career. Um, I'm really excited by the fact that we can take cancer that has been largely a hopeless disease and turn it into a hopeful condition. The things that I thought were impossible when I was a young doctor, stage 4 cancer, game over. Nothing else you can do. The compassionate thing is to tell people, to let go, prepare for the end. And now I've seen this myself. Like, you can take people in stage 4 with stage 4 cancer and you can convert it to stage 0 cancer.
Wow.
It's happening every day, not to everyone, but the fact that I know people who've actually gone through this transition, including my own mother, from stage 4 to stage 0. And part of why I'm here in London is to actually present some of the transformations that are actually happening in oncology, in cancer medicine. We can do the things that we didn't think was possible. By the way, what's the secret to that? The secret is that there's a lot of details, but the real secret is actually to treat the whole person, to be integrated in our thinking, not to think of cancer as just sort of this enemy that you want to bombard and destroy and kill, but rather what we want to do with the individual is to heal them. How do we actually take advantage of everything that the body has and try to heal the person? And that seems to be the trick. So I'm very excited by that. Gut health is a key, because if you don't have good gut health, your body is going to have a lot harder time healing itself from cancer. And I'm talking about actually like fighting the cancer and recovering from it. That resiliency, bouncing back to who we want to be, regardless of what disease you are. Like, this is a bit of my medical orientation. I went to medical school, and my practice as a physician has always been, how do we keep people healthy? I know we're trained to diagnose illness and then treat chronic illness, but really what's interesting to me, how do we keep people healthy? And yes, we're all humans, so we're going to get sick every now and then. But in the theme of what we've been talking about with brain health, the human body is remarkable.
Yeah.
Very resilient, bounces back. How do I contribute to our knowledge by finding out, discovering what helps people bounce back? And if you can do that from cancer, advanced cancer, that's an amazing thing. So I would say that's one of the things I'm most excited about, is really not winning the war on cancer. I think that's the wrong terminology, the wrong construct to think about. What I would say is, how do we bounce back? How do we become resilient? How do we heal from a previously lethal disease like cancer? I think the answers are, first of all, we're seeing it happen in real life, in real time. I think the answers to that are being intensely researched right now, and they're within our grasp. Within the next few years, we're going to know a lot more. And like so many other things that we're learning about being well, our gut actually is at the center of it.
I mean, I'm literally drinking the pu'er tea. I think I've said that correctly, that you kindly bought me as a gift when you came in to see me, which we know is fantastic for our gut microbiome.
Pu'er tea, teas are healthy in general. Pu'er tea is a unique tea. I wrote about my most recent book called Eat to Beat Your Diet. Green tea, oolong tea, black teas, they all have benefits with these catechins, these polyphenols. Pu'er tea is unique because it's a fermented tea.
It's delicious.
That has its own unique tea healthy bacteria that will actually be, when you drink it, is good for your gut health. And this has been studied. The Pu'eracillus bacteria improves metabolism, lowers inflammatory markers, and for people who are trying to fight harmful body fat, visceral fat, the fat that's in the tube of your body, right? So tube of your body right here. Even if you have a thin body compared to a big one, you can still have excess visceral fat. Pu'er actually can melt some of that away in order to be able to give you better metabolic health.
Wowza. I mean, it really needs to start getting into mainstream supermarkets here because it's delicious and it does all of the fantastic things that you've just said. William, I am so thankful to do this in person. Third time lucky. Thank you for just the wealth of information that you brought today. Now, I have asked you this question before, and I should have looked at your answer because I did last time, but I have to ask it again because I think it just changes with how you feel. So what does live well, be well mean to you?
Vibrancy is my answer. Anything that I can do to feel vibrant. And I was at a dinner last night where somebody gave me a great insight about vibrancy. He put it into words, something that I've been trying to capture. And he said, vibrancy is the opportunity to get new experiences. And so for me, I love this idea of being able to have new experiences. Coming to your studio to do your podcast, new experience, and makes me feel vibrant. And that's really what I look forward to.
Well, this conversation has made me feel very vibrant and a lot of hope and new experiences, I think, is what life's all about. So, the fact that you even gave that answer, which was so different, shows the importance of that question of living well, being well. It fluctuates with every new experience. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to put this all in the show notes, but please just tell our viewers, I know they always want to know more. So where can they find you, all the information?
I'm on social. My handle is at Dr. Dr. William Lee, L.I. You can find me on my website, drwilliamlee.com. And I just launched a new YouTube series under the same handle, really where I'm addressing and talking about all the topics that people are writing into me to try to get answers to. I realize there's an opportunity to just blurt it out and feed it out to the people who want to know.
Yeah. And connect to the audience, which is the best part. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.